We'll go ahead and get started. I know a few people will probably join a little bit later, but for those of you who don't know me, my name's Colleen Curlin. I lead the programming for the Battery. I'm so thankful for you all to join tonight. We pulled together some programming virtually to fill in some of the gaps while we postpone things while things are going on with Omicron. And this is one of my favorite events that we do every year. It is our Cure for the Imposter Syndrome workshop with Michael Tertez, who's not only a creative in residence, but he is the founder of the University of Superheroes, a coach, a mentor, a thought partner to value driven leaders, innovators, and visionaries across the country. He works with individuals to unleash their unique gifts and align more fully with their values to live a more impactful, purposeful, and fulfilling life. Michael is also a developer of the Superhero Leadership Program, which provides leaders with a breakthrough awareness and action around what's possible for them as a leader. Michael's a highly sought after presenter for his Imposter Syndrome, to feature Arch Nemesis workshop, and Discover Your Superpowers for teams and organizations. I first met Michael when he was doing his Defeating Your Arch Nemesis workshop at Sparked in 2019, I believe. And since then, I've had the fortunate opportunity to work with him to do virtual programming, including this Cure for Imposter Syndrome workshop that we did last year for our virtual Sparked. And Michael asked me tonight to share my own imposter syndrome story. And after thinking about it briefly, I realized that before I made the switch into event production full time, I was contemplating this career change from music industry and marketing. And I had moved up to San Francisco and was looking for roles and decided to start my own freelance event production. And so I was going into these rooms and taking meetings with people. And in no way did I feel prepared to be an expert for these people. But slowly but surely, people were reaching out and I got more and more clients. And so I had to work through my own imposter syndrome as I embarked on a new career. And here I am 4 years later at the Battery doing it full time. So I am pleased to hand it over to Michael, a partner and a friend as well. So Michael, I'll let you take it from here.
Colleen. So hi, everyone, and hi to people who might be watching later on a recording. And let's just acknowledge a lot of us are probably really tired of Zoom, but here we are again in the roller coaster that is this pandemic. And yeah, I was really pleased that Colleen reached out last week and said, we had to cancel our programming. Like, will you do this? Because I love doing this workshop and I can't wait to do it in person because there's a whole other way this works in person. I'm really pleased that you are here tonight. And I want to start out by saying, so this is the Cure for the Imposter Syndrome. And one of the most important parts of the cure is that it starts now and it starts during this workshop. And the way we start to cure the imposter syndrome is by talking about it. So I'm really going to ask people to participate tonight. If it is in fact the participation that starts the cure. And I'll get to later like where that fits in the cure. Unfortunately, we're in this whole pandemic thing and with COVID. So unfortunately, there's not a vaccine for this yet, but there are a series of remedies. And I'm going to talk through, well, what are the remedies that help with the cure, that actually create the cure? So welcome. Why don't we start just by getting here? Enough of us have been on Zoom enough times. We know, get into the chat and put your name, put where you're viewing from tonight. So I'll be, so say hi, and even if you just want to say, a sentence about good living room couch, good. And even if you want to then put in just a little, and I'm here because, and that'll get us going, and it brings us together by saying hi and talking a little bit about why we're here. Yeah, and so even people who have your camera off or your mic, any way you can participate will really be helpful, because that's what starts to move this along. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm just also looking, like, what are people saying? Oh, wow, someone in an actual office. Congratulations, Jennifer. Yes, the imposter syndrome career of choice. Yes, it is. Now, this is great. Thanks for checking in like that. I actually work with several authors, and we talk a lot about imposter syndrome is a big deal. All right, I'm going to share my screen. And let's see, where did it go? Oh, there it is. And hold on, I'm going to unshare my screen first. Whoops. Okay, here we go. Ready? Everybody go, ready? Okay. And now, okay, great. So how's that look to people? Give me a thumbs up if it's looking good on your screen. Great. All right. Here we go. So let's just start with some common language. And, and if you're here, like, and if you read the overview, like, you already get it. You already know what the imposter syndrome is. And let's just start with a definition, just so we're all on the same page. So the imposter syndrome is the experience you have when you doubt your skills, your talents, your accomplishments, and have this persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. We all kind of get that. That's why we show up to talk about this. I'll even right now, I said, I asked Colleen to tell a little story. I even had this show up for me. I've been coaching for 15 years. I've worked with leaders across the country and around the world. And even last week, even last week, I got a referral for a new client, and I went to their website and I read it. And my first thought was, they should be my coach. And I it was a referral, and I said this to my friend. I was like, is this accurate? And they were like, oh, come, I'll say the way they said, oh, come on, dude. They're like, you are the exact person, to be coaching. And so even when, you're where I am and you've been doing this forever and I've been doing this forever, it still comes up. So, so let's talk about who has it. And so all the smart, successful people that you think they have their shit together, they have the imposter syndrome too. So I want to give you some idea of how this works. Is the early studies of the imposter syndrome were done with women academics, like successful academics, and it was more than 70% of them felt like an imposter. And then as people have continued to do more research, it's the more competitive the environment you're in, the higher the instance of imposter syndrome. And then another thing to be aware of is that if you or the people around you are in an environment, if you're in an environment or someone around you is an environment where they are not part of the dominant group, the intensity and frequency of imposter syndrome goes up dramatically. So, pretty much everyone around you, if you're around smart, successful people, are experiencing some version of the imposter syndrome. And it really is, as you see later in this presentation, I'm talking about it is a virus, because there is really a way this syndrome has infected us. So that's who's got it. And so, like I said, it is, so I'm using the pandemic language because we're all in it. If it's too soon, I'm sorry. But it really is like a virus. And the way the imposter syndrome works is it really does, it infects us. So it infects our mind and the way we think. And then when it affects our mind, it actually affects our body, like the way we hold ourselves, the way we carry ourselves, the way we feel in our body. And it affects our emotions. It affects, literally when you feel like an imposter, you feel down, you feel dissonant, you feel fear, worry, anxiety. So it is this infecting thing that then reinforces itself. So what we're looking at, and another way to think about it is, a virus, what it does is it goes in and it programs cells, like it reprograms our cells, and it duplicates itself. That's sort of the same thing with a syndrome like this. It's a program that's running, and it kind of keeps reprogramming itself. So that's where I think the virus analogy actually really works. So we're going to take we're just going to dive right in, and we're going to do a little self-assessment. So I'm going to ask you to do is get out a pen, or your computer, or use your fingers. I don't care. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read through these symptoms and just keep track of how many of these symptoms you experience. So, the first is, do you discount your success? So the second is, do you highlight your mistakes or failures? So you discount your success, you highlight your mistakes or failures. Do you diminish what comes easily or naturally for you? Do you experience perfectionism? Do you overwork in order to prove yourself? Like we're going to talk later, this is a huge one. Do you experience persistent self-doubt? Are you highly self-critical? Similarly, do you beat yourself up for mistakes? I call that running yourself over with the caboose. You make a mistake and then you beat yourself up for it. Do you negatively compare yourself to others? You look around and look at all your colleagues and you're like, oh, I'm not all that compared to them. Are you afraid of being exposed as a fraud? Like the number one symptom. Are you afraid people are going to figure out that you're faking it, or afraid that people are going to figure out that you're not sure you know what you're doing? Do you not feel like you've earned your accomplishments? In other words, do you feel like you just got lucky, which is another one later, I guess. Do you procrastinate due to fear of making a mistake? Or do you procrastinate? Because often procrastinating is due to fear of making a mistake. Are you afraid of appearing conceited or arrogant? And do you feel alone or isolated in your belief that you're an imposter or a fraud? And do you think most people around you have it together more than you do? Do you feel lucky? More like you just got lucky as to why you're there. It's just circumstances, not you. And do you think that anyone could have done what you've done? And it's just like it doesn't have anything to do if you just got lucky, or anyone else could have done it. So tally up your score. And what I'm going to ask you to do is, again, throw your score in the chat. Let's see what we got out there. Now, the thing about this assessment is it's not weighted. You can just have one of these and have a severe case of imposter syndrome. So this isn't some like scientific weighted, but so if people could throw your score in the chat. Oh, I see there's 90 messages there. Let's see. Okay, 12, 10, 15. Some people got almost a perfect score. 15, 7, 12, 10. Okay. I can put, I often feel somewhere around, like, I've probably had 9 of these in the last week. Okay, so people are in the right place. And thanks for saying it's embarrassing. And what I'm trying to do here in this workshop is actually normalize this. Even though it feels embarrassing, it is incredibly common for people to experience the imposter syndrome. I mean, since I've started doing this workshop in the last year and a half, if I say imposter syndrome, almost everyone says, oh yeah, I know, I have that. So let's not be embarrassed. Let's actually acknowledge this is a thing, and there's something we can do about it. All right, good, thank you. So, okay, so instead of doing breakout rooms, I found in this workshop, this is the participation part. So far so good. People are throwing stuff in the chat. So now we're gonna up it a little bit. And this is an opportunity to share in the group about any of these symptoms that you have. And so essentially share from where we are right now, what's your experience of the imposter syndrome? Which of these symptoms do you have? What it's like to have them? And I think, why don't we have people raise your hand? Do people know how to raise your hand? You go into participants and hit or you can just, given that it's a small group, you can just do this and we can unmute you. Hold on. I'm gonna stop the share so that we can do this. Okay. Anyone? Okay, Laura.
I would just say I thought it was interesting, the few that I didn't pick, and there were only a few, and thinking about, well, why didn't those resonate with me? And for me, it was, I feel like I do work hard. And so oh, you're just lucky, or this just, fell in your lap. I mean, I do feel like I work really hard, and like I deserve at some level what I've got. But other than the few that address that, everything else really resonated with me.
Thank you. And is there any one or two that really speak to you that you can even describe as this is what it's like to be me when I'm...
I think the anxiety of feeling like you're going to make a mistake, or, being somehow found out, which is just very unrealistic. I mean, I have been doing what I've been doing for a long time, and you would have thought somebody would have found me out by now if I really didn't know. Although I feel a couple of times like, I just like in a field where you're just criticized all the time. But and just when you think about these feelings you have, they when you really sit back and look at them objectively, they're just kind of unrealistic.
Right.
Don't make a lot of sense, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't make sense. I still feel that way.
Right. Yeah. So I'm going to go into why we have that, and I just want to appreciate that craziness that we can do something for years and years and years and still feel like someone's going to find out. Thank you. So Colleen, are you running this? Can you unmute the next person, please?
Yeah. Go ahead, Robert. Laura, I'll get to you. Sorry.
Great. Well, I'll start by saying hi, Michael, and I'm gonna reverse your self description as an imposter, because you're the real deal. Really appreciate all that you've done. I've worked with you beyond these sessions through the battery, and I really appreciate it. I just wanted to share that I don't think of myself as an imposter, as something that I carry with myself, but I always remember a comment that a colleague had once made to me earlier on in my career, where I was, being successful in my area of expertise, and he was in a different area of expertise. And maybe he, I don't know what gave rise to him making this comment, but he said, you've made some good deals. We'll see if that, continues, or if it was just luck. And I've always kind of carried that with me, because there has been a shadow, I suppose, within me that says, maybe I have just been lucky, and I do feel lucky. But it really rankles me too, because I feel like, well, I do work hard, I do earn it. but there is that comment that just has always stuck with me.
Well,
And
here's an interesting thing, Rob, is what was most likely going on is that they felt lucky, like they were lucky, and they were just projecting on you. It's really common with imposter syndrome when someone's feeling it to project it out there and question whether or not someone else deserves their success.
Yeah, I get that. That makes a lot of sense to me. But it did strike a nerve with me too. Like,
Sure.
yeah, maybe I am just lucky. Maybe this isn't real.
Yeah, no, they got you. All right, thanks, Rob. I think Laura.
Laura, yeah.
I think it's interesting that everybody has said the one thing that stuck out the most to me, which was that you just got lucky. I think, I know that I work really hard and I've had some really great success with some of the things I've done. But yeah, that's the one that always sticks out. And it also makes me think, if I leveraged, a relationship to get to where I am, take a contact to, pitch a story or something like that, it makes me wonder, well, am I just riding the coattails off of someone else's success? So I definitely feel like I compare quite a bit.
And you're also speaking to, because we're at such an interesting time in our culture where we're really aware of becoming more and more aware of privilege. And so this sort of privilege, do we deserve comparison, like there is some murkiness in here that we're going to actually have to work out. So yeah, no, thanks for raising that. It's really appreciate that. So if we have one more, and then we're going to move on to the next piece. Jessica.
Sorry, I don't know how to do the Zoom raise your hand.
You did great. I saw you.
But I just wanted to comment that it's funny because the imposter syndrome, at least for me, really varies depending on who I'm with.
Yeah.
I work at a company and we have 3 studios, and the headquarters studio are people that I've known the longest, and there's probably the most power struggle there and internal politics, and that's where I really feel it intensely. And then when I go to my other studios and I'm working with people, because we don't have that dynamic, I don't question it, and there is a lot more fun in what I do because I feel like I've earned it. Whereas just certain people make you just kind of doing your own head.
Yeah, and that's where so what if I were to sort of play with that is what you're saying is that your home studio, there's some competition there.
Yeah.
And that when we are in competition, that actually increases our sense of feeling like an imposter.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting, so partially it's like, oh, interesting culture, right?
Yeah, now that I'm saying it, I'm like, is this healthy?
Right. And so working with the imposter syndrome in an organization can actually relieve that, and then you get more. I do a whole other workshop for leaders and managers on how do you essentially cure the imposter syndrome at work, and there's a whole sort of way to do that. But here we're looking at it as individuals, and they overlap a bit. But so you're kind of what's the word? You're calling out your culture a little bit.
Yeah. Sorry, I was a little late joining.
That's okay. It's all good. No, we're doing great. So there's going to be more opportunity to share. I want to, today's about the cure. So we're like, okay, we've all got it. So I want to talk about, I'm going to share my screen again. And I want to talk about, okay, so how do we get the imposter syndrome? Okay, we did that. So how do we catch it? And I'm going to do 2 pieces here. So one is, some of you also may have been to my workshop called Defeat Your Arch Nemesis. And the imposter syndrome is one type of it's like one type of internal arch nemesis. It's one way that expresses. And all of our arch nemesi they're essentially they're survival strategies. There's strategies that we developed to protect us, and they were brilliant when we developed them, but at a certain point they no longer protect us, they prevent us. And so just to give you like a crash course on how we develop survival strategies, there are lessons we learned and internalized from child consciousness. So as a child, we develop something, but as an adult, it really doesn't work. I think specifically for the imposter syndrome, it somehow has a lot to do with we compare ourselves to when we're kids, we compare ourselves to adults and everything looks so easy for them. And our struggle as a kid doesn't actually get reflected back to us. So we feel like there's something wrong. I would love to do some actual research on this, but this is sort of science of Michael. I think this is a big way we develop imposter syndrome in our culture. So we get a lot of messages from society to be perfect, to do things like easily and effortlessly all the time, to be successful all the time. I think even now, social media is reinforcing this. And then also there are traumatic events that happen to us where we make a mistake and we get shamed or we get, highlighted. And so there can be traumatic events that sort of create our own imposter syndrome. And I brought a slide in tonight I want to share because I think so. I think you'll like this. There are 5 what are called survival archetypes, and so there's I'm not going to go into all 5 right now. That's another workshop. But one of them is called the saboteur, and the imposter syndrome is an expression of the saboteur. So the saboteur is using our rational mind, so rationalizing instead of our reasoned mind, which is reasoned assessment. And so I'm going to read this. So the saboteur, and here imposter syndrome as a type of saboteur, it's related to low self-esteem, and it keeps us safe by staying small. So that's what the saboteur does. And so the saboteur is fearful, skeptical, doubtful, untrusting, and it wants to stay in control. And it has a strong critical voice around worthiness. And it'll sabotage our success, satisfaction, and fulfillment in service of staying safe. So the saboteur is constantly talking you out of the possibility of the life you want, the possibility of the success you have. And the saboteur, I love this line, is it's the master of getting you to tolerate. So the monologue of the saboteur is, that'll never work. You don't really believe that, do you? You've tried it, it didn't work in the past. It won't work now. You shouldn't feel that way. It's kind of, so, and then it's, don't be arrogant, don't be self-centered, don't be so sure of yourself, which is all sort of imposter syndrome language. And then it's like, don't get too big for your britches, don't rock the boat. And then really underlying, it's you're not good enough, smart enough, you're not fill in the blank enough. And it's essentially saying you're worthless. So that's overall the saboteur. And the imposter syndrome is a variation of the saboteur. It's a very particular variation of the saboteur that we in our culture have a lot of. So I wanted to give you sort of that, essentially theoretical understanding. So like I said, it's what protected you now prevents you. And so the way I think for any of you who've read my bio, I use the superhero archetype as a model and as a metaphor for personal development. And if Superman grew up in Smallville, and in Smallville he couldn't use his gifts, he wasn't being his full self, he had to withhold himself in a lot of ways. So what I want to do now is have people share, like, how is your imposter syndrome keeping you safe or keeping you in a Smallville, essentially keeping you from some things you would want in your life. It's almost like, what are the we did the sort of the symptoms, and then, so what's the impact of the symptoms? Like, what's really happening for you because you feel like an imposter sometimes? So again, I'm gonna unshare. And, again, raise your hand. While I'm waiting for a hand raise, I can say, I spent a day, another coach and I spent the day together yesterday doing what we call a mastermind, like helping each other. And I realized for me that there's been a big program I want to launch, and it's really edgy for me. And I realized there was a part of me that was going, well, that's not yours to do. Like it's too complicated. There was something going on. I realized, oh, like duh, like imposter. So it's been holding me back from launching a pretty radical program, and he helped me realize, do it anyway. So anyone want to share here? Yes, go ahead, Simone.
I guess for me, it would be, I think, just going back, I definitely resonate with the saboteur and all those different elements you were explaining about it. And really, I think like feeling like I'm being held back and kind of growing in my position sometimes because of this fear of, I think just sometimes it's just irrational, like doubt or, skepticism. It, like saying it out loud, it really does feel irrational. But I think with being in this place right now with events, I do events. And so just with the uncertainty, and we can all, I think, relate to that, but there's this level of, where do I see the business going? And, there's another halt and hurdle, and getting over that and feeling like, you can't come up with the right solutions for clients, and just kind of getting in your head with all the what ifs and the doubts, and I think it can just bog me down with really all of the incredible things to come. And sometimes I can just get really, really stuck in my head with that. So holding me back, and honestly, just the anxiety over, over the uncertainty, and letting it get to me so much. So yeah, I think that's really what I'm trying to kind of break out of, is just the negative cycle and negative framework that we kind of, or I just tend to fall into without even really thinking about it sometimes. And I am a very like bubbly, happy person. And then I feel like I just kind of fall into this negative mindset sometimes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I really want to speak to the pandemic, because Colleen and I talked last week as we were planning this, that there's a way a lot of us, because of the pandemic, aren't getting to do what we do in the way we do it, which is actually sort of exacerbating our imposter syndrome. Like, I have a perfect example is I was going to lead a workshop. It was actually for 100 men out in the woods, like at this big, men's event. And I hadn't done a live workshop like that in over 2 years. And I was really wondering, is that workshop guy available? And I was really anxious about it. But of course, the second it started, this version of me showed up that's always there. I just hadn't met him in a couple of years. And so I until it started, I felt like maybe I don't do this anymore.
Yeah. Wow.
No.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that for sure. When the pandemic first hit, because I was in hotels and restaurants before and got laid off, and finding like, okay, well, I love what I do, and how to navigate into a different realm of that, even through the uncertainty and the doubt, and realize that it's going to be different, and how do you really grab onto that and be ready for the ride, which I think we've all experienced. But so it's like, okay, when you look back, I made it, and, we all figured it out. So it just feels like irrational doubt a lot of the time. So.
So we're actually going to get, when we get to the cure, we're going to talk about irrational doubt in there and how we deal with that. Is there one more person? Because after this, we're going to head to the cure. Is there one more person who can say a little bit about how the imposter syndrome actually affects you, keeps you in a, what I would call your Smallville? One more. It helps everybody cure. Come on. Amy. Go ahead.
Hi, Michael, and sorry for not being on video. I will say
okay.
thank you for doing this virtually because I'm one of those people that has a house full of COVID, including myself.
Oh my, I'm so
I'm on
sorry.
the tail end here and feeling a lot better, but I would not be able to attend this if it was in person. So thank you for
You're
doing
welcome. You're
it.
welcome.
I think one of the things that you said that really resonated is a bit of like anchoring in the past of like tried this before, did this before, and using, you know, that as a reason to prevent and sometimes even like to prevent even thinking about it. It's almost like that chapter
Mhm.
has closed or moved forward. And so I would say like for myself, that's one of the things that I've been trying to think about, you know, now that it's like, you know, certain circumstances, just like the example you went through, like something during a pandemic versus not being a pandemic, or for me, you know, I have 12-year-old twins, like, you know, trying to do something before you have a family, when you have your family, the ages of your family, like I'm trying to be better at not making things black and white and thinking more about the other variables that are at play.
Yeah, that's so perfect, is that the imposter, if we're in that saboteur, if we're in the imposter syndrome, things do get really black and white. And what I call it is it's young thinking, because really that these things get formed when we're at a young age, and it's actually young thinking. It's not, you know, it's not reason thinking, it's we're rationalizing. So yeah, thank you for that. It's really common. Okay, you guys ready for some cure? Go, yay. Okay, great. Okay, I'm gonna reshare. Okay, so moving out of Smallville. So the cure. So curing the virus, you know, curing the imposter syndrome. Again, I want to go back to, we're going to look at different, you know, it influences all of our systems, our mind, our emotions, our body. And so we're going to look at the different pieces. You know, just so you know a little more about me, is for the last few years, I've been doing a really pretty deep dive on somatics, and actually how what's called our physiobiology affects everything. And so we're going to do a little piece on that tonight, as part of the cure. But really, we're going to go with the mind, we're going to go with the emotions, we're going to go with the body. So the cure to the imposter syndrome, the first part is know thyself. The more you know about who you are, like intimately and accurately, the more that'll cure the imposter syndrome. Because the imposter syndrome, when we feel like an imposter, it's really an inaccurate understanding of who we are. So know thyself. And so the cure for me is knowing yourself really well develops what I call badass humility. And I'm going to give some definitions of badass humility because it might not make sense. But this is where we're headed. So for me, the cure is to become badass humble. So here's some definitions. So badass humility is the state of being both proud, which is, you know, I'm really good at this. I really was successful there. I have these gifts. I have these skills, like feeling really proud of, I'm actually going to define proud in a minute, as well as humble. And humble is like, oh, and there are places where I don't know this, or I don't know that, or I have something to learn. And if you can be in that place of both being proud of yourself and humble, that to me is extremely powerful. In fact, if you think about people who exhibit badass humility, they're people who you see as powerful in the world. So a couple of definitions, just so we get, why is Michael talking about this? So humility, my definition of humility is accuracy. So this is back to know thyself accurately. Humility is it's an accurate self-awareness or assessment of both your strengths and your weaknesses. That's humility. Pride, or being proud, is feeling deep pleasure or satisfaction as a result of one's achievements or qualities. So see how they come together is you have an accurate self-awareness, and then you feel deep pleasure in your awareness of yourself. And then being humble is not prideful or haughty or arrogant. Is someone who's humble is aware and accepting of their weaknesses, their mistakes, their failures. So when you bring all these together, you get what I call badass humility. And that is the cure to ever feeling like an imposter. If you are accurate, you can't feel like an imposter. So that's where we're heading. So how do you get there? So for this, these are sort of the first, what I would call the first 4 components of the cure. And so I call them the bomb. So apply the bomb of humanity. And I'm going to go into each of these. Take your daily dose of self-compassion. Take vitamin confidence and get in the right shape. So these are the remedies to move yourself towards badass humility. So the bomb of humanity, and the reason I said participating tonight is important is because getting together tonight and talking about this is applying the bomb of humanity. That is what we're doing. We are saying, I feel this too. I experience this too. So if at least 7 in 10 of the people around you are feeling like imposters, if you apply the bomb of humanity by, I think my next slide is talk about it. Yeah, if you apply the bomb of humanity by talking about it, you start to cure it for yourself and others. And so the language I use is I say to whoever it is, I say, I was feeling like an imposter or a fraud recently or in this experience. Do you ever feel that way? I haven't met anyone who says no. And it's literally like, the reason I call it the bomb of humanity is because it literally is like a bomb. It's like you're applying something that it's like, okay. It starts to calm down, the infection, the virus. So that's remedy 1. Give me a nod if you're like, oh, I think I could do that. Okay, cool. So daily dose of self-compassion. So one of the main symptoms of imposter syndrome is perfection. And again, how many people do you know who feel like they need to be perfect, experience perfectionism? And so self-compassion is the antidote to perfectionism. And so what I want to do is give you a little model, because sort of work with the brain here so we can learn, well, how do I give myself some self-compassion? Because often people, when you say give yourself some compassion, it feels a little bit like, oh, just be nice to yourself, or so I'm going to give you a little model here. So, whoops. So one of the ways to transform perfection is to embrace the stages of learning. And anyone who's done any learning work or transformational work, this model will probably look familiar to you. So there are 4 stages of learning anything. The first stage is unconscious incompetence, also known as blindness or ignorance. And if you are there, you're in a situation where you're supposed to do something, you actually are an imposter because you don't know what's going on. So that's the first stage. And one of the examples that's really easy is that here, raise your hand if you know how to drive a stick shift. Okay, all right. So, or if you've seen one. So good. So if you, my cousin who has a PhD in physics got into my car and said he could drive it, and then looked down and saw the stick shift and had no idea what to do. So he was unconscious, incompetent in driving a stick shift. He thought he knew. So the second is conscious incompetence, which is you know that you don't know. And that's the hardest place in any learning process, is knowing that you don't know what you're doing. The third step is conscious competence, which is you still need to think about what it is. So driving a stick shift, put your foot on the clutch, put it in gear, put your foot on the gas, take it off the clutch. Like there's this whole thing you need to do. You need to think about it when you're driving a stiff shift. It's less uncomfortable than conscious incompetence, but it's still a bit uncomfortable. And then unconscious competence is flow, is mastery. And the reason I give this model is when you are feeling like an imposter, when you're feeling this, if you just step back and go, where am I on this? And knowing that everyone is always somewhere in one of these 4 stages. And especially if you're doing something that's your thing, that most of the people around you are either in unconscious incompetence with it or conscious incompetence. And they're looking at you as, wow, you know what you're doing. And if you make a mistake, you go, oh, where am I? Oh, maybe I hit a blind spot. Maybe I'm, now I know that I need to learn something here. I became consciously incompetent. Or maybe it's like, oh, you missed a step and you weren't thinking. So I give this as one tool for starting to transform perfection. Okay, next part. Vitamin confidence. And I just have to say, I've watched dozens of videos, read books, read articles on the imposter syndrome, and have been a bit underwhelmed by other people's approach to curing it. Because one of the things I think everybody misses is what I'm going to share here, which is being confident in who you are naturally. And so I'm going to go into, well, what does that look like? So here's another way to think about the imposter syndrome. This is what I call my very sophisticated slide. There's who you really are and who you think you are. And there's actually a gap there. Who we think we are is a limited version of who we really are. And so what we're trying to do is, as I said, know thyself, get more and more accurate with who we really are. And not a lot of people really get themselves. So that's how you get vitamin confidence, is to really get who you are. So this is my frame. There's other ways to do this, but this is the way I do it with people, is to help you identify what I call your superhero identity. And I'm going to go through it quickly, but there's 3 pieces. And these 3 pieces come together as the unique version of you that you actually are. So there's your superpowers, which are, your superpowers are what you do easily and effortlessly, like you're not even trying, and other people find them miraculous. And we all have them. And most people don't know what their superpowers are. They may have an inkling, but they really don't get it, because it's us. And we assume, well, everyone can do this. So we diminish what actually is the thing that makes us really special. So then there's our story. Each of us has a story that brought us to where we are that is unique. And we often dismiss and diminish our story. And we also often don't really know what our values are, what we are standing for, that influences the way we use our gifts. That influences how we make sense of and act from our story. So in my world, when you get these 3 things, it's a very powerful, unique expression. And knowing this changes everything about the way you engage in the world. So so one of the things to ask, you can take this as a note because it's not on the slide, to start getting at this, if you are brave enough, which I have all my clients do, is ask people, what do I do that you think is miraculous? You'll be shocked at the answers you get. It'll completely change your life. So that's So like I said, so what you do easily and effortlessly, like you're not even trying, that other people are mystified by and find miraculous. We all have them. I call them our superpowers. Other people call them gifts, genius, talents. But to me, they're superpowers. That's the way they show up for me. So your vitamin confidence is to find miraculous about yourself, what you take for granted, dismiss, or diminish. In fact, this is the underlying mantra of my entire coaching business, is I help people do this, is find yourself miraculous. And if you find yourself miraculous, just like everybody else is miraculous, if you find yourself miraculous, you can't be an imposter. So, and then the last part of the cure we're going to do, I'm going to unshare in a sec. I talked about we do somatics. So people may have seen the TED talk of the woman who says to, I forgot her name right now. I'm really sorry. I should have it on the slide. To stand in a superhero posture and you'll feel more confident. Someone might have chatted it. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask I said, let's see if we can participate. I'm going to unshare. So one of the ways in here is to work with our somatics. So you can have your camera off, that's fine. Is when you think of yourself as an imposter, and when you have anxiety, when you have fear, when you have worry, there's a way you hold your body. So I'm going to ask everyone right now, just hold your body in the way that you hold it when you feel like an imposter. And so for me, it's slouched, and if I take it to the extreme, it's fetal position. And there's actually a way in which we're all always kind of fighting with this somatic way that when we're in a saboteur consciousness or imposter consciousness, we're actually fighting with taking this physiological position. And then when you take it, there's an actual way you feel emotionally, because your mind is thinking you're an imposter, your body's in a physiological state that reinforces it. So I'm asking you to do it so that you can feel it. And then the exercise I do, and I have clients do, is now find a shape or a posture that makes you feel good, makes you feel powerful, makes you feel strong, makes you feel possibility, awe, joy, you name it. And so for most of us, it's standing up, it's arms over our head, or it's like this. And if you practice with your physiology, it will in fact change the way you think and change the way you feel. My example is when I started coaching, I started going to networking meetings, 2007. And I remember being in the parking lot and going into, Chamber of Commerce meetings, whatever, and feeling like a little boy. I'm like, I don't deserve to be here. And I used to look in the mirror and go, you're a man. You've had 2 careers. You've been successful, and literally feel it in my body. And it would completely change my experience of being in that. So if you're not doing it here now, I'd say try this. Just find your shape that makes you feel really good about yourself. And then if you want to go even farther, if there's actually a place you really feel in your body this is stuck, there's dance, there's yoga, there's all kinds of somatic things you can do to really move your adaptive way of being out of your body. And also, if anyone wants to talk to me about, there's a body of work I'm studying called emotional resolution, which is a somatic way to literally resolve these feelings. It's super cool. So let's see. I'm going to share again. didn't work. Okay, so tonight is a 1 hour. I'm giving you as much as I possibly can in 1 hour. So where I want to go now is come back as a group and have people share. Is like, what happens if you imagine that you're talking about this with people and you're applying the balm of humanity and getting, oh, everybody feels like this. Like most of the people around me feel like this. And you're, I have to go back to my, and you're applying a daily dose of self-compassion. Like you're being kinder to yourself around mistakes and failures. And what if you're really getting who you are and your gifts and the natural way you are in the world, its impact, and you change the way you're holding yourself in your body and feeling in your body. Like, it's like, imagine that. Like, imagine that this goes away and it's worth just, saying into the group. If anyone, I'd like it if a couple of people would say, well, what would become possible for you? Like, what actually in a very real way would be different for you if the imposter syndrome went away and it was supplanted with some badass humility? So would someone like to share that, please? I mean, I gave my example as like launch this radical new program that has been on my mind. I'm trying to, Colleen, I don't know if you can see, I can't see the whole group right now.
I can see everyone.
Okay.
I just dropped something in the chat.
Okay. Good.
I feel
That's
like what
good
would
too.
be possible, what would be possible for me is I'd feel more comfortable collaborating with other people because I'd be so confident in my own skills. So I'd be more open, I'd share more like confidently, and so there'd be more opportunity to create new stuff with people because I wouldn't be hung up on feeling like I'm not enough or I don't belong there or anything like that.
Yeah. So Rob just posted in the chat, like, I'm going to stay on for another half hour, but given that we're at an hour, I want to, like I said, I want to give everyone, people everything I could give in an hour. And I also want to say that if anyone wants to, I'm going to go to the next slide, is, stay in touch with me, follow up. So there's a couple of things here. I just want to say this to the group. One is, if you're out there and you're like, I want to cure my imposter syndrome, I want to attain this badass humility, like I want to feel confident, I have some things I want to do in my life that I'm not doing, stay in touch with me. You can send me an email. You can also, I've opened up my calendar. If you go to schedulewithmichael.com, you can go in and grab some time with me. So could you type that in, Colleen? It's schedulewithmichael.com, and that goes right to my calendar. So, or shoot me an email and we'll schedule some time. And also I want to say that I do this workshop for organizations, for teams, if that's something that's interesting to you. I also do the other one, which is for managers and leaders, which is more of a training around, well, how do we solve this at work? Shoot me an email or schedule time with me.